those of you that haven't done your shadow tours yet, this is our 4th week. We're over a third of the way through. If you haven't done at least one shadow tour, you're behind the curve. So you've got 6 more weeks to do 2, 3 more. Okay, so keep that in your planning.
And I would like to point out, if anyone does not have a trainee badge or the QR code for getting into the hours recording system, Rebecca has left a yellow pad on the bar in the center, the refreshments opposite the coffee, where she would like you to put your name down so that she can get you a trainee badge, which of course gets you in the door and gives you a bit of credibility when you are facing people who are visiting the museum. And the QR code is very helpful too. So just put your name on the yellow pad.
How you actually edit. If you remember last week, we talked about, let me get this out of the way. We talked about how you sign in and sign out with your assignments. And I hope all of you have done that today. Is that right? Has everyone done that? I don't see all the nodding of heads. Yes, okay. So, and of course you would be using Docent training for your assignment on that. Okay. So, let's say that you have forgotten to do that. And you want to make sure your time is recorded. It's very important. Every docent has the responsibility of accurately recording their time. So what I'm going to show you here is how you would go in after the fact and actually enter that in there. All right? But I digress, because the first thing I wanted to show you, well, actually, we can go ahead and do it. Let me get this out of here.
Have those things yet. Okay, Bob.
All right, so let's say that you forgot to sign in, shame on you, or you forgot to sign out, and you want to make some adjustments to your records. You can do that. And also, one way to make sure that it's done is to send an email to our volunteer coordinator, Rebecca, and she can help do the modification for you. But on our Docent website, we have the ability there there's something here called the volunteer portal. And what that does is that initiates the VikeNet program. So if I click on that, say a prayer, and I need to log in with my information. Now, what I've done here is I've logged in with my information. Each of you in your welcome package was given a temporary password. And I don't even remember what those are, but what it would do is the first time you log in, your username will always be your email address. And then you have a temporary password, and it will prompt you then to make a brand new password. And that's how you would get into here.
Do you want to know the password?
I would love to know the password.
Star 1863, lowercase s.
Did you get that?
Those are 2 things you should remember. Star 1863. It's going to be on your exam.
Right. And the point there is that then it prompts you for a new password, and that's up to you what you do with that. Okay? So here's mine. Way too much information. And so you can see here we have service, and this will load up your service history. And if I do it for 2026, I can see everyone that I've logged in on for this. And there's one that we did on February 3rd, if you remember right, this is where I was showing you how to log in, and I did Docent's meeting, and I immediately logged out. So what you see here is it has like 0.01 hours, because I've logged in and logged out. And I haven't made any changes to that. So what I can do here is I can scroll back up, and it says post service. So if I did it for February 3rd, and I would say I started at 8, and I went to, I think I went to 12. And it's asking you for your assignment, and this would be docent meeting. Fortunately, all our docent things are in alphabetical order, so it's kind of nice. Docent, where'd it go? Oh, there it is, sorry. Right. And round trip travel. So if I put in 1 hour, and I post it, are you sure? Yes. And now, for February 3rd, I now have, as soon as it updates, an accurate measurement. There it is, docent meeting. Oh, and look, I made a mistake. It's 8 a.m. to 12 a.m., right? So this is where you would actually call or send an email to Rebecca and say, I'm sorry, I screwed up. This really should have been 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And she can make those changes for you. But try and be accurate, don't be like me. The second issue that you run into is, let's say you forget to sign out. And actually I have one here. On January 31st, I was San Salvador sales crew, and I started at 10:30, and January 31st was the day that we had the potluck. So I went immediately from leaving the sales crew all the way up here, and I forgot to log out. So what I see here is I have 4 hours with 0 travel time. So what I did is I posted for beyond that. So in other words, I did a 2:30 to 4:30 with the travel time, and now that's accurate, and Rebecca didn't have to do anything on that. So that's kind of the reason that we use VikeNet, and that will come from your docent page and from the portal. All right? Any questions?
Will you scroll down?
Can I scroll down? Yes.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at all those hours.
Yeah, what this will give you is the hours that you have. It'll give you your lifetime hours. I'm proper, myself, I'm actually about ready to wrap up into 5,000 hours. But that's not the purpose of showing all this. Right. All right, so that's what you'll have. And those hours are very important for a number of reasons. Number one is for accuracy for grants and matching grants, etc., the monetary part of it. Second thing is, that's how you get recognized for your service. You get cute little badges like I have on my collar here. You get plaques and all kinds of different things like that. All right, so please, please, please use that. Try and use the Vike Touch with the QR code. And if you still have a problem, go ahead and make a change to it like that.
And more importantly, the hours that the volunteers accumulate for the museum is converted to money in terms of grants and things from the
No,
state.
most importantly, I want to see you recognized.
Mm-hmm.
But
But yes,
the museum
those
gets,
numbers do go on grant asks, so.
so, it's very important in terms of fundraising for the museum that we demonstrate the hours of volunteers, okay? So please do that. Before we get started in our presentations, Bob said he was giving 3 shadow tours. He volunteered 2 of which have already filled up in terms
That's
of
correct.
signing.
Yes.
So which one do you have still available?
March 3rd.
I think it's still open.
Yeah.
So if you
It's
wanna-
on there's a sign-up sheet there right next to Rebecca on the table.
Do you want to show them how to sign up for one?
I can't do it on mine.
Oh, you can't see it because you're
Uh-huh.
you're the leader. Okay, never mind.
I'm the Gruppenführer.
You can show
See this
other
calendar?
people.
This calendar shows all the openings. Let's sign up for anything, Bob.
All right, so let me, well, here on the 19th of February.
This is everything that is open for you to sign up. There are some things you won't see yet because you have not graduated. You also don't have to see all the maintenance and sale crew stuff because it's a pretty extensive list.
Right.
So you're limited to what I've assigned to you. Okay,
Right.
so you would pick what you wanted, hit that schedule button. You choose the time, since usually, for deck watch, you can tell me whatever time. And then you're just gonna hit schedule me. Then I get an email, it goes on to the main calendar, other people can see that you're gonna be here. It's like, hey, I wanna hang out with him. Oh no, he's gonna be on the boat, I wanna be on this one instead. So that's just a really good way. And so for the shadows, if you use that for me, use his list too and use this. And then I tell him when it's closed, when we're at capacity of how many we can handle. And I send him a complete list and your email and your phone number in case you don't show up, so he can call and see if you're okay.
And so what I just did here was a schedule of myself from 11 to 5:30 on Docent Deck Watch. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, it would tell me what other volunteers are scheduled for that day.
So that sheet over there, the closest one that was open was March 5th.
Right.
That's
So-
not
Well, that's
before-
his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So there other ones might appear before that?
Yeah.
And you'll get a notice, because you're not gonna see it except on that date. So you have to go, shadow tours aren't something general, so they're specific to you. You have to go to the dates that we send you, and then you can schedule it
Right.
yourself.
You have a question?
Yes, sir. I tried to sign up for tours last night, looking at this calendar scheduling here,
Yeah, we were talking.
and I didn't see any tours on the calendar at all.
Did you go to the dates that they were set for? You have to go to the specific date that there is a shadow tour.
Okay, that's what I didn't know. I didn't know
Yeah.
what the dates were, so I saw just a blank calendar.
Besides Bob, are there any other
Rich is doing,
people that are doing shadow tours
Rich and David Berg.
that are scheduled?
Oh, David Berg's done, but Rich, you have one more? Two more?
I'm sorry?
You have two more shadows to do?
I have two more shadows, one is coming,
Sunday?
Sunday at, 9 AM.
This coming Sunday?
Yes.
This coming Sunday, I believe that is the 15th,
Mhm.
and then March 22nd.
March 22nd. So if you haven't written it down, write it down. Otherwise, figure out how to approach the calendar here. We need more senior docents to volunteer to do shadow tours to make sure that everybody gets them in. Got a hand?
Who is doing the March 5th tour, because I need to make sure it's a different one.
Bob.
I already have Bob.
Yeah, it has to be a different person. All right, so I need more senior docents
It's helping
to
the social
step
worker.
up and do shadow tours for us, okay?
Where do we meet for that?
At the information booth.
At the ticket booth unless specified otherwise.
Are we good?
Okay, I just wanted to mention one other thing, and this is actually for every docent. One of the simplest ways to do this as a schedule is we have one called Docent Deck Watch Anytime. You don't even have to fill out a little slot, right? And what that basically saying, that's a universal, any ship, anywhere, anytime. And if you just schedule that, that's what I need to worry about.
And you can roam around all you want. You
Yep.
do not have to stay on one.
And don't be, I hear people say, well, what happens if there's too many people here? Docents.
No such
That's
thing.
not a problem. That's not, we have so many stations that people can go to. If we had 10 people here, we would have a
I'd
spot for
faint.
each one. What?
I'd faint of happiness.
All right. I need to get this done, get ready for the talk here. So
Well,
I'm gonna,
David has one little thing to do, right here, please, before we get started.
I don't, right?
Please?
You
Good
don't?
morning. We are very fortunate to have with us this morning a distinguished guest. Jamie White is visiting us. Jamie is a master mariner and a master rigger of tall ships. He has rigged tall ships from Tahiti to Scotland. He was the chief rigger at the museum in San Francisco on Valclutha. He was the director of the Texas Seaport Museum with Alyssa. He has rigged Glen Lee in Scotland and Mosholu in Philadelphia. He's been everywhere. He is the guy who has frequently come down here to do independent third-party rig inspections on all of our sailing ships. So please make him very welcome. And this is just an example of the kind of amazing people that this museum attracts. So, you see Jamie.
I would just like to say a few things. I've been all around the world in different maritime museums, and the wind in the sails of any maritime museum are the volunteers and especially docents. Because if you go back, if you go back in your mind when you very first went to like a museum of natural history, and as a young boy or young girl, your eyes were just big and you saw dinosaur bones and you're wondering, what is all this stuff? How do you assimilate all this information? Well, it's always by personal contact. So the job that docents do is almost more important than the job a rigger can do, because I can train any idiot to be a rigger, but it takes a certain quality in character and just spirit to be a wonderful docent, and it's a vital role. And every time I come down to San Diego, and I try to get down here often, I am always amazed by the docent program, the volunteer program, the maintenance I see happening, and you know, I consider this museum to be the gold standard. So you have. I applaud you. So anyway, anytime I'm down here, if you see me, I'm always willing to talk about rigging and my previous occupation, which was manufacturing bikinis. So you can tell you. It's a nice meeting you.
Thank you, Jamie. All right.
You're cool without a microphone, right?
Right on time. We're gonna, just this week and next week are dedicated to the Euterpe. If you haven't heard of that boat before, it's also called the, thank you. So this is our flagship. This is her 100th year in San Diego. So people have lots of questions about the Star of India and Euterpe. Also, it might show up on the exam. So, you know, this week and next week are very important. Pay attention. And David, you're going to lead us off?
I hope so.
All right.
What does Euterpe mean?
Hey, give me a chance. I haven't even started yet. Oh my goodness. Just want to say I first met Jamie back in 1989. We were both clambering up in the rig on the Alyssa, and neither of us had gray hair or glasses at the time. Anyway, it's been a while. One more thing before I start. We have a visiting ship here. That's XC Johnson from the Los Angeles Maritime Institute. Their crew is here for the Tall Ships Conference in Chula Vista. So go look at that ship. Don't step on deck without asking permission. Okay? That's the way it always is on every ship, except when they're open to the public. All right, so we're going to talk about Euterpe. Whenever you talk about anything as a reporter, you want to ask several questions. That's who, what, when, where, and why. I will be answering hopefully all of those questions, not necessarily in that order, and at random intervals. So, Euterpe. Why was she built? We got to start out with the relationship between the United States and Great Britain at the time. One of the major suppliers of raw materials for the textile industry was the United States. Without the textile industry, Great Britain, England specifically, would have had their economy come to a grinding halt. They provided the pants and shirts and sails and socks for most of Europe. And they were very busy doing that, and they needed a lot of cotton. Most of that cotton came from the United States, specifically the ports in the southern United States. But what was happening at that time in the United States was not a lot of fun for anyone. The Union blockade of the Confederate ports prevented most of the cotton from leaving the southern ports. So England was starving for raw materials. They had to get it from somewhere or their economy is going to collapse. Well, they happened to have this colony over the other side of the world called India, where some cotton was growing and they could get it there. But more specifically, jute was a product that they could also use. What is jute? Okay, notwithstanding what was going on in Germany a little bit later, jute is a fiber, it's a bast fiber. Now, when you say bast fiber, That's the kind of a fiber that is produced by stripping the stalk of a plant. Hemp is very much like that as well. And so you needed jute, you needed cotton. While the supplies were dwindling, a lot of people were laid off their jobs, and we needed a big iron ship to make the trip that's 4 to 5 times more distance than it is from England to Savannah to go from England to Bombay, for instance. So, or Calcutta, some of the other ports in what they used to call Burma. So you got to get there, and you got to go around what had recently been renamed Cape of Good Hope. Why did they change the name of that place in the southern tip of Africa? Well, because Cape of Storms sounds like a place you don't want to go. So they said, oh no, it's good. It's good. Just go that way. It's fine. So we're going to build a big iron ship. And there was a shipyard up in the Isle of Man. And this is one fact that people love to say, is that only 5 days after the launch of Euterpe, Lincoln gave his Gettysburg Address. So that helps people fix their mind in time. So that's a good thing to tell our guests. Where do I aim this at? Doesn't work. Hello? Hey! Bob!
What?
How do I change slides?
You were.
I did it once.
You did it before.
I did it. I don't have. Okay, where's Isle of Man? This, did I do this?
Yeah, you
Okay,
do that
don't
there.
touch these. Technology and I do not get along very well. Isle of Man is a smallish island located in the Irish Sea. It's surrounded by England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Ireland too, and Wales. It is an independent crown dependency. Much like Bermuda is, it has its own government. Its defense is handled by the UK. So that's kind of like the same way Canada was before they got their own flag. Oh, come on. All right, this is a photograph that I took of our diorama that is on the tween deck of Star of India. This shows the hull mostly complete. The scaffolding has been removed. The deck has not been installed, and none of the masts are there. What looks like it might be a mast forward is a smokestack in the background. So the model maker put a little piece of cotton in there to make it look like smoke. So that's not a mast. The lower masts were installed before launching, so she's not quite ready to go yet. They built these ships, as they still do sometimes, on a rail at somewhere between 4 and 5 degrees angle. So when you try to make things level on a ship, you need a special level tool to see that it's level, because it has to be off by the same amount that the rail is. Come to my workshop at home someday. You'll see the floor is sunk, and I do the same thing. So this Ramsey Shipbuilding Company had built a lot of smaller boats, wooden ferries, and they had only built one iron ship previous to building Euterpe. So there was a company, and this might even be on your exam, called Wakefield Nash and Company, who commissioned the build of this ship because they saw the opportunity to go to India and get a bunch of cotton. Oh, went the wrong way.
David.
Which way?
May I interrupt you for 1 minute, please?
Oh, here we go.
Several years ago, I was standing deck watch on the Star of India, and up comes this charming little British lady. I knew because of her accent, very much like Margaret's. And she introduced herself as being the great, 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 great granddaughter of the Nash who commissioned the building of the Star of India. And she wanted to come and see the vessel because her family history ended when Wakefield Nash sold the vessel 6 years after she was built. And she wanted to know what happened to that ship after her family owned it, to go back and enhance her own family history.
Very cool.
So, I have my story about the Star, you'll have your story about the Star. There are docents in here that can tell you that they met people from New Zealand who had come over, whose ancestors had come over on the Star. So this is almost a pilgrimage site here. So I'm sorry for interrupting, David, but I thought that
It's
might
okay,
be
I skipped a
best.
couple of slides. I only have so much time, thank you. All right, so in the 3.5 years that the Ramsey shipyard was building iron ships, they built 5 iron ships. The first one, called Ramsey, was quite a bit smaller than the rest of them, and it was sort of an experimental thing. I think we're going to be happy that we didn't get that one, because they had a little bit of practice before trying to build Euterpe. Now, I'll go a little bit about the names. Somebody asked, what does the name mean? Euterpe is the name of one of the 9 daughters of Zeus in Greek mythology. She began as the goddess of music, song, and dance. Later on, the mythology morphed a little bit, and the muses were assigned more specific jobs, if you will. She became the muse of lyric poetry. So, song lyrics. Bernie Taupin, okay. So, she has an attribute that no other muse had, and that is a double flute. Now, I think our Euterpe, which is the figurehead on our ship, has a single flute.
Isn't it a lute?
Flute.
No, but I think, isn't it a?
Lute is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Add an F and it's a little tube. Okay, so, yeah. But I think it's a single flute. The Euterpe had a double flute. I don't know if she played out of both sides of her mouth, how that worked. I don't know. The next ship after Euterpe was Erato, which was another of Zeus's daughters. She was the muse of erotic poetry. Okay, and then
Limericks?
I'm not going to say this correctly, but I think it's Eurydice. Oh, wow, I did that. Okay, another character in Greek mythology who was the wife of Orpheus. I'm not going to go into detail. And then the last one they built was a steamship, and it's unclear from what I could see, but we think she was also rigged as a bark and had steam. This was starting to be in the age where you had the option of using your steam engine or your sails. Steam engines, as we use our engines today, are for getting in and out of port, going upriver, against the current or against the wind. If you didn't have that situation, you were able to sail, shut that thing down, save your fuel, and go. Delaware was named after the state of Delaware, who presumably somebody over there was the buyer. So the word Delaware is probably French, Delaware or Delaware, which is of the war. And why they named a state like that, I don't know. They claim to be the first state. Who knows? I'm going to get into some stuff here that is not on your exam, but some people seem interested in this stuff. You walk by Star of India and you see these marks as you walk by, if the tide's high enough, that you'll see these. So LR on both sides of this circle with a line through it, that is a logo that represents the insurance company and the standards by which this ship is measured. So Lloyd's Registry. That's all that means. It's not left and right. It's Lloyd's Registry. That is the standard by which the ship was measured and originally insured. I am absolutely certain Lloyd's is not insuring us nowadays. It's whoever the museum has, but it's an old mark. It's there. To the side of that, you only see 2 levels marked off. Many ships have many more levels marked off, but these are the extremes. Now, what do I mean? In the in the winter in the North Atlantic, the density of the salt water is about as dense as it's going to be anywhere in the world. Because the water is more dense in that time and space, the ship floats higher, just as you float higher in a salt pond than you do in a fresh pond. And so when she goes into fresh water, she will sink down to that FW marking with the same load. These are the maximum load levels that you can load this ship within the insurance company's specifications. If you overload the ship beyond this, your insurance is invalid. So it becomes very important that you do so. Also, one of the things you can do is look over on the port side and measure from the water to this mark, and then look on the starboard side, and hopefully they're pretty close, and you've loaded your ship equally. She's not leaning one way or the other. By the way, that's called a list. I don't know why English has so many different words that are the same. So the little horizontal line that you see above that is the lower side of the framing, or inside of our tween deck. It's in the overhead as high as you can load your cargo. So everything from that line all the way down is the available cargo space. Now, there's a lot of ships nowadays that load containers inside the ship, but they also load them on deck. In the old days, cargo doesn't go on deck. That's where the boats are, that's where the rigging is, that's where you do the work. So cargo is below that line, and that measures the cargo carrying capacity. So that's what that little line is there. The big fat white line is just a trim. It's just a pretty line that we can paint any color we want. So, the displacement of a ship. I'm going to talk a lot about the size. People are going to ask you, how big is the ship? There are about 10 different answers to that that are correct. So, how big is the ship? Light displacement is how much water do I have to push out of the way when I put this ship in the water? How much water is displaced? The weight of that water, the actual physical mass of that water, what is it? 1,050 tons at minimum ballast. Okay, so, Bill.
You might mention it's a Plimsoll mark named after.
Oh, did I not say that?
No.
That's a Plimsoll mark.
There you go.
Yeah, it's named after Samuel Plimsoll, who invented the thing for the Lloyd's Registry.
And he fought for 80 years to get it approved.
The other thing is that you will see that similar kind of mark, but it might not say LR. Modern ships, especially American flag ships, you might see AB, and that's the American Board of Shipping. And there might be others, but I'm not fully aware of all that. So, where was it? Okay, so now you've moved some water out of the way because you've launched the ship, and that is the light displacement. Okay, now you're going to load some stuff into it. And we're still talking mass, we're still talking weight. You can put about 1,700 tons of stuff into this ship. Add that all up, and you've got a total load displacement of 2,750 tons. Now that's the amount of water you've pushed out of the way. Okay? But wait, there's more. Tons means different things. For instance, there are a lot of different sizes of barrels or casks that you might employ in shipping your goods across the ocean, or even loading them onto an ox cart, whatever. The largest of these, you'll notice it's spelled incorrectly, and I wish this ton was continued to be spelled incorrectly. This is a ton. A ton is 1 cubic meter, or 1,000 liters. Isn't the metric system great? it had only been, the metric system itself had only been really recognized universally for about 50 years before the launch of Euterpe. So it was still kind of relatively new thing. But there were all these different sizes, including something called a barrel, which I can't even read it from here, 200 liters. So if you took 5 barrels and tried to put them in the same space as 1 ton, it would take up more space than the ton. Even though the stuff inside might weigh the same, because the space between the barrels matters. So if you take the space that a ton cask uses and you stack them all together in the bottom of the ship, you're going to come up with the net tonnage. How many of these barrels will fit in your cargo space? And that is the tonnage that is shown right here in the lower right picture, 1,197 and 1/100th. Whoever came up with that, I don't know. That's how many of those barrels or ton casks can fit inside the ship. So when you see the tonnage or the load carrying capacity of a ship, it is not weight, it is volume. Does that confuse everybody enough? Okay.
So did you have to also specify which type of cask was being used for the conversion of weight to volume?
You don't convert weight to volume.
Isn't that what this is doing?
No, because depending on what's in the cask itself, it could weigh more or less. So you don't convert that. The tonnage carrying capacity of a ship is volume. There is no conversion.
So it's only using the largest cask, right?
Yes.
It's only using the largest cask.
That is, now, things have changed recently, and I don't know.
Okay, I can't read that. What does it say?
1,000 liters, or 1 cubic
1,000
meter.
liters is in the largest cask.
Yes,
Thank you.
which is the same as 1 cubic meter. All you do is move decimal places around in the metric system.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we talking about a metric ton, a short ton?
Oh, don't start with me. Like I said, there's details here we're not going into. All right.
Troublemakers.
Up to that point in time, there were 2 ways to build a ship. You build a wooden ship that had wooden frames. Don't call them ribs. Wooden frames and wooden planks. And then the new way to build a ship is iron frames and iron plates. Now, there were hybrids. There were some wooden frames with iron plates. There were some iron frames with wooden planks. I'm not going to get into all that. If you're going to build a wooden ship, you're going to drill a hole. After clamping the 2 pieces together, you're going to drill a hole through both pieces. It's going to be a round hole. Then you're going to take a square spike and you're going to drive it into the round hole, and that's going to help make it fit. Now, the hole is a little bit smaller than the spike, so it fits real tight. And then when you take the spike out 35 years later, as they did on Californian, it now looks like this.
That's great.
This is what happens after a little while. It's the only one I could find that didn't break on the way out. So I should show that to you. This stuff's going to be available, I don't know, maybe on that table over there afterward. But when you're building an iron ship, you still have to drill holes. Now, drilling a hole in iron is kind of a whole different thing. So you got to clamp the pieces together. Sometimes it's just one plate overlapping another plate, like so. Sometimes it's this with a frame. Sometimes that frame has a stringer going across. You might be going through 4 pieces all at once. Your rivets are going to have to be long enough to accommodate whatever it is you're doing. When you clamp them together, you're going to drill through all the parts that you're going to be connecting. Drilling through iron, which it's not the easiest thing in the world to do when you don't have electric power tools. So imagine how much time it takes to drill 40,000 rivet holes to build Euterpe.
Do they heat them?
The drills do heat up when drilling because of friction, but you don't heat them on purpose. So they will heat up, and then you go get another one because you've dulled this one and it's too hot to use now anyway. So there's a whole team of guys that do nothing but sharpen drills. And then you've got your hole, you can see through it. There's a guy on one side of the hole, and there's a guy on the other side of the hole. One guy's probably standing on a stringer, and the other guy on the outside is on a scaffolding, and somebody down at the fire pit is heating up the rivet. Now these examples I have are much smaller than the ones that we'll find on Euterpe, but these are the best I could do. So the rivet is heated till it is red hot. And then the guy up on the scaffolding has to catch it as it comes up to him. So he catches it in some leather pouch, and he doesn't have to touch it. And then he's got this tool, and he can grab it. I'm not good at this. I'm not a pro. I'm going to touch it with my hands and burn myself. He can hold it this way. If that's going to be working out better for him, he can hold it this way with the same tool, if that's going to work out better. And he puts it in the hole. It's red hot. The guy on the other side sees it coming. The guy who put it in the hole, he uses the bucking bar, which has a little dimple in it that matches the shape of the head. Then the guy on the inside uses the rivet set, and he gets to be a little further from the heat. And he puts that on this end of the rivet, and he smacks the hell out of it until each end has the same look. That's a lot of work for 40,000 rivet holes. So you got a lot of people doing this. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of heat. There's people falling off the places they're standing. People are getting injured. But it's pretty good pay, so they kept doing it. And that is step by step, a little bit at a time, how you do it. Now, in the upper right corner of this picture, you can see a drill press. This would be the kind that you would use if you were drilling a hole straight down. There were other kinds that had seats built in that you could push your back against the back of the seat and drive that in horizontally. These machines had to be lifted up onto the scaffolding and held in place with straps or ropes, and then very slowly drive each drill into making the holes through all the parts that are clamped together. I hope I got a little bit of a picture of the kind of work that's involved in just one rivet installation, much less 40,000 of them. When you go aboard Star of India later today, especially when you're on the tween deck, look up at the overhead, see the riveting there, look over at the hull plates, see the riveting there, and hopefully you'll be impressed with the kind of work that it takes to do. Now, why would you build a ship out of iron when all the ships before you have been built out of wood? Well, there's a few reasons. For one thing, the forests in England were pretty much decimated by all the shipbuilding that had happened in earlier centuries. You need oak, mostly, to build your frames, and especially the knees. Knees are hard. Knees are, how do I describe a knee? It's where, good catch. Where the branch comes out of the main trunk, there's a nice curve. And if you cut that out just right, you've got the grain going exactly the way you want it to go to fit in a corner and hold the frame against the beam. And there's only so many of those joints in the natural world. And when you've cut all those trees down and you've used all those joints, the only way to get more of that raw material is to go invade another country and take their trees. Well, they weren't very happy about that, so part of the reason wars happened. But so we're going to build out of iron. Why? Wood is flexible, especially when it absorbs water over time. It becomes even more flexible, and your ship not only twists, but it sags or it hogs. And the longer your ship is, the more of that distortion you're going to get. when you build with iron, and if you do it well enough, you're going to get a lot less of that twisting and that distortion. And maybe, we're thinking early on, these ships might even last a little bit longer than the wooden ships, which had a 5 to 10 year life on average, which is about the same as the life of one of these semi-trucks you see going down the road. And they were seen the same way as we see those. They go by, there they are, and they're doing some job, they're hauling some stuff, and it was the commonest thing in the world to transport goods around in those days. The fact that we still have one of these very typical, almost invisible ships today is amazing. So, also, for the same strength, you need a lot thinner material to build from iron as you would have from wood. Wood frames are big and thick, wood planks are thick, so if you were to take the same outside dimensions and put all iron in there instead of wood, you have a lot more space for cargo. So that was another advantage of building for out of iron. And then later, for steamships, it just made sense to have an iron frame under your big, heavy engine and iron spaces to contain your fuel and all that sort of thing. These are models that we have in our collection, and just as examples of the transition from wood to iron and also from sail to steam. So a quick sort of graphic here of the iron ships versus wood. In just a few decades, the iron shipbuilding supplanted the wood. Now this is not number of ships, but this is tonnage. The iron ships tended to be larger, so there may have been even fewer of those built, but the tonnage they could carry was a lot more. Here's a close-up of some of the riveting that you'll see today. You go in there, again, heating, cutting, punching, drilling, fitting, riveting. It's just a whole lot of noisy work. And if something didn't quite fit, heat it up and smack it with a hammer. Just keep doing that until it fits. And that's how it's done. The sources for the materials were mostly in England. These little 3 dots. The L&W Walker is up there at Newcastle. I don't know if you can see that very well. That's the uppermost one. And Derwent and Constant Iron is just next to that. And then Brunswick Iron Works was down by Birmingham. I'm not an Alabaman. I can't say Birmingham. If you look closely, and Ian may be able to show you at least one of these on your walkabout on the tour today, the maker's marks were in some of these. So there's L&W Walker, maker's mark in the overhead. And there, oh no, that's a frame. This is an overhead beam, and that was the Consett supply. So look for these, see if you can find them on our ship. And then the hull plates were stamped Brunswick. These maker's marks have been painted over many, many times, and some of these maker's marks are just completely filled with paint, impossible to find. But somebody, I don't know who took these pictures, was able to find one of each. So we don't know exactly when the keel was laid down, but we do know that there were 2 collision bulkheads, one forward, one aft, and that she was light ballasted at 800 to 850 tons. It would have been more or less a permanent ballast that it could have been removed if you had a really heavy cargo, but most of the time they probably did not do that because it's difficult to get the right ballast in the right shape to put in the right place, so we'll probably just leave it there.
Hey, Cam, we have one question.
Uh-oh.
I was wondering, how much ballast does she sail with today?
Ooh, good question. I don't know. You might have.
850 tons.
How much?
850 tons.
Well, that's what she started with.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So And those are giant blocks of concrete that you can trip over when you get down in the bilge.
To be continued next week.
Yeah. So, by 1863, there were steamboats. Most of them were ferries or tugboats because that's what was needed. But steam was well established by the time that Euterpe was launched. And it took another 30 years before steam-powered vessels exceeded the tonnage carrying from sail vessels. And so it took quite a while of transition, and a lot of people resisted that. Sailors that knew how to climb rigs and pull on ropes didn't want to go down in the engine room and shovel coal. I mean, you can see why. So any change in technology is resisted by those who know how to do the old thing. And that's same with me. This computer is just confusing me. That's why I call it a confuser. Okay. But steam turned out to be more reliable, and steam was faster. But steam takes space. You've got a lot of machinery. Need a lot of space for your fuel, which started out to be coal, and then got condensed to a diesel and oil later. But you still need space. You have to carry spare fresh water because a lot of that's blowing off on steam, and you got to refill that. So there's a lot of space taken up by the machinery and supporting equipment that you cannot use for cargo. So sail ships were still viable into the 1900s because of that. As long as you didn't really have a schedule or you didn't need to be there on time, put it on a sailing ship. It'll get there eventually. And this is what I just went through here. And where are we at? Okay. So our Euterpe has frames on 18-inch centers. The overhead deck beams are spaced twice on that, so 36-inch. And if you look up, you can't really see it in this picture, but the overhead deck beams kind of look a lot like railroad track because that's what the iron people knew how to build. And so, but they were specially built to be deck beams. But the railroad track design worked so well that they just reused it in the deck beams. So frames outside of the ship. Some people call them ribs. Don't call them ribs. Stringers run horizontally fore and aft, every 4 to 6 feet, I think it is. I'm not sure. And then the deck beams above. The keelson is shown in this lower picture, and that's down in the bilge. You can see the big concrete blocks on both sides. That's her current ballast, and the little rail cars down there that are used to move ballast around or to drag crew through there, which is lots of fun. Right? So all three masts are set on that keelson, which is that big box at the bottom that sits on top of the keel. Now there's different thicknesses of plating, all of which are far more thick than our ship really needs. And that's probably part of the reason why she still exists today. The next year after being built, Lloyd's came in and looked at what was going on and said, you know what, I think most of these plates can be about half as thick as they are now. And so the ships beyond this build were built much lighter. And so we were kind of lucky to be able to get one that was built super heavy, and she's lasted this long. Now, we look at the joggle or overlapping plating, and it appears from the outside that some of the hull plates are thicker or wider than others, and it's not the case. It's just that you have an overlap where you have double rows of rivets holding those plates together, and so from the outside, half of them appear to be wider. From the inside, the other half of that set of plates appear to be wider. They really are more or less the same width all the way. There are exceptions to that, where the curves are, but that's how it's done. And this is not necessarily a view of our Star of India on the right, but it's very similar to the way that she was constructed with the same number of decks. However, that lower deck is a lot lower. It's very similar though. Okay. Moving on. How big is the ship? There's a lot of ways to measure. I told you about displacement and cargo carrying capacity. Those are the two most common ways to say how big is this ship, but some people want to know how long it is, how tall the mast is, all that kind of stuff. All this is in your Docent manual. I'm not going to go over this, but she's got a lot of ways to measure how big is she. So when you answer that question, understand what the question is before you give an answer.
What does draft mean?
Draft is how deep she is below the water,
Okay.
which is going to vary with the load. And that's where the plimsoll marks come in. The plimsoll marks show you where the maximum draft can be achieved.
Is that what the 20 and 19 and 18?
Yes.
Okay.
That's in feet, because even though some things are metric measured, back then and still today, Britain still measures some things in imperial units because they invented it, and some things in metric units because that's what other people understand. They're probably the most mixed up country as far as that goes. So, one thing I will cover from this slide is that you can see that the bottom, the cost to build this is 25,000 pounds, which translates to about $5 million in today's money. Do you think we could build another Star of India for $5 million? No. Today? How'd they do it? Well, the workers were barely paid. That's right, but it's the best job they could get on the tiny little island, and that's what they did. So, and materials costs were probably a little cheaper than they are today.
Hey Dave, we could do that with volunteers.
We can. Yeah. Who wants to drill all those holes? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, it was more than that. Yes, it was. Thank you, Jim. All right. So originally her decking was red pine with teak borders, and today her deck is Douglas fir, and probably should be some newer Douglas fir in some places. But she originally had 3 capstans. Don't know where the third one would have been. We've got 2. The one on the main deck is probably not in the location where it was, but we don't really know. But that's where it was put when she was brought here to San Diego. The forward capstan is driving the original windlass from 1863. The only other original deck furniture that we know of that is there now is the bilge pumps. And they still do operate when you change out the leather piston covers. Yeah, we can still get some water up out of there. And if you go down into the Orlop, I don't know, Ian, are you going down that far? No, okay. Well, there's a tank down there that stands in for the bilge, and we can put water in that tank so we can pump it up on deck and let the kids get their feet wet. She did have some staterooms, even though she was a cargo ship. There were people wanting to go that way, and so she did carry a few passengers during her cargo days. So those were already there. The lower masts were iron. The upper mast, or the top mast, and the topgallant/royal mast were wood, and we still have that today. However, something's changed. I'll show you in a minute. The deck house, where the galley is, still contains some of the old berths. Those areas are locked away because there's a giant mess of storage stuff in there, and we probably won't go in there at all. But there are still some spaces for the crew that have specialized jobs. They're not on watch. They're the cook, they're the carpenter, the sailmaker, steward. Those people had cabins in the deck house near the galley.
How do
Yeah.
the scuppers work?
How do scuppers work? Well, there's just a hole in the ship where water can run out.
But how do the scuppers work when, on the deck, when you have passengers? The lower decks?
Oh, the lower decks? No, you wait for water to go to the bilge and use the pumps.
Okay, gotcha.
But hopefully your decks are sealed way better than we have them today, and we don't get a lot of water down there. In addition to the scupper drains, there are freeing ports that you can see here. Most of these are painted shut by now, but when the hinges were working, the lee side would be left open, and if water got up to the bottom of these freeing ports, these things would swing open and just let it all out at once, and keeping your deck from being awash. That being said, anytime you walk through a doorway on deck, you're gonna step up and over, because there will be water on deck, and you want to keep that out of the interior spaces. She did carry an evaporator, so you'd have to light a fire somewhere, boil some seawater, condense that seawater. It's almost like a distillery, and so the salt gets dropped off on one side, the fresh water is collected somewhere else, and they could make about 100 gallons of fresh water a day, which was not enough for 400 passengers to take a bath, but it was enough to keep cooking and stay alive. Up in the overhead in the main saloon, you've got a couple of skylights. The one on the aft end is the original from 1863. This is stained glass. The taller figure is a representation of Euterpe, one of Zeus's 9 daughters. The forward end is a representation of the coat of arms of the city of Liverpool, and I am of the opinion that maybe we ought to talk about redoing that one. Maybe. It's not original. That was done 100 years later during the restoration here in San Diego. And so it's not original anyway, and we might want to make it look a little better than it does today.
Why did that one fall apart so much faster than the original?
Well, it's on the forward end, so it's going to get a little bit more weather. Maybe it just broke accidentally during some event. I don't know why it was restored, but the glass was probably just broken. And so we had to put a new piece of glass. Hey, let's make it look like the old one. I bet it looked great in 1963. Not so much today.
That's my question. Why did the paints on the new one fall apart when the old one is
well, the volunteers who did the work during the restoration may not have had the same kind of skills and knowledge as the people who did it originally in 1863. So that art may have bypassed our volunteer corps at the time. So if you know anyone who does stained glass, send them our way. This is stuff that's also in your Docent manual. I'm not going to go over this, but this is the kind of information, if you like to memorize numbers and dates and things like that. Some of our guests like to know this stuff. I don't remember this stuff. I'd rather tell a story. So I already talked a little bit about cotton and stuff like that. Probably don't need to go too much into that. You gotta get cotton. Okay, this is from the U.S. to England, and what different dates in time show you the more and more dependence on cotton from America, which got interrupted suddenly during the Civil War. And this shows the relative imports from America and India. And you can see that during the Civil War, the Indian cotton was far outweighing the American, and then it switched back after the war was over. The places that Euterpe went are outlined here in little red circles. specifically Bombay, now Mumbai, and Calcutta, now spelled differently, Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. All these names changed because, who knows? Burma is now Myanmar, right? I'm probably saying it wrong, I just know how to read it. So she went a number of different places in 6 voyages. Round trips took between 1 and 2 years. And well, there was one that went even longer than that. And you can see her general layout of crew there. So we're gonna start with her maiden voyage. Now remember, she was launched in 1863, but that doesn't mean she was ready to sail. They had to rig her. And as Jamie can attest to, that takes time, money. So in January 9th, 1864 was her first commercial departure. And just a few days later, she smacked a unlighted Spanish brig off the coast of Wales, and there was enough damage that the crew said, we don't want to go on this trip. Brand new ship, we don't know how good it is, and now it's all bent out of shape, and we want to go home. And so there was her first mutiny during her first few days, and she went back to Wales and got some new crew. These guys went to 14 days hard labor for their mutiny, which is probably pretty light sentence compared to what they believed they would have endured on a trip all the way to India and back. So they got off easy. And then she arrived in Calcutta May 1st, and then back to Liverpool 11 months. Doesn't say what cargo she carried on the way out, and that we don't have really any logs of that, but that was consigned by the ton. A ton is a measure of volume. Okay. The second voyage, she left with the same captain, called in at Calcutta, and then somewhere around Madras, there was a cyclone, otherwise known as a hurricane, and slipped a cable. What does that mean? That means we're probably dragging our anchor, and so we're going to cut that loose. We're going to leave the anchor, we're going to leave our chain behind, and we're going to be drifting off, and the storm ruined a lot of the ship. They had to put in a couple of different ports for repairs, and it took 23 months, almost 2 years to do the round trip because of the repairs. Oh, and by the way, the captain died. So the first mate brought her back to England. Now here's a little bit of a survey that we found. The first, January 5th, so this is 4 days before her maiden voyage, she had her final survey. And it says here, if you can't read it, in iron. So her masts and yards are iron and in good condition. She had iron masts. When they say mast, it's the lower masts. And then, from 1867, this is after she's come back to England and gone through repairs. It says that they removed the wooden masts, or specifically teak masts, which were put in place of the original iron masts. In India or Ceylon, wherever that repair was made, they ripped those out and put in new iron masts. So the iron masts that we see are not original from 1863. They came in 1867. And so that same technology, you take a flat plate, you roll it until it overlaps, and you rivet down the joint, and you come up with a tube. And that's how the lower masts are. But these are not the originals. So third voyage, I'm out of time. There's my timekeeper right here. Anyway, you can read about that in your Docent manual. She had third and fourth and fifth and sixth voyage, and with 4 different captains. And then she got a new job. I'm going to put this stuff over there, and you can take a look at all this iron stuff if you like.
Great job, David. Why don't we take a 8-minute break and be back for our next talk. Program up to this point has come up when the Euterpe was built and launched. 6 days before the Gettysburg Address, by the way, someone mentioned. That's always a fascinating little thing for our visitors. And we're going to pick up from there, and Ian Urquhart from Down Under, where Euterpe spent a lot of time, is going to pick up this story for us and move on.
Thank you, Jim. Everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. Okay. So I do get to cover the 52 years. I'm going to have to do it in about as many minutes, so I'm going to move it along pretty quick. I do want to ask a favor of you. You can see I'm going to talk about 3 different distinct periods. We're going to do from 1871 to 1897. I'm calling them the global voyages for a reason versus immigrant voyages. We're going to talk about the Euterpe being modified, from 1898 to 1901, being involved in the lumber coal sugar trade, and then finally being converted, and for 20 years working as a fishing support vessel. Because we're really pushed for time, I'd like to ask a favor of you. If you can hold your questions at the at the end of each of those 3 areas I talked about, I'll ask you for questions. All right. I'm also going to give you the background a little bit to put some of these things in context. David mentioned before about the what happened and where it happened. I'm going to try and give you a little bit more background on why certain things happen. Hey, why are they going to New Zealand? Why aren't they going to Australia? Why aren't they taking immigrants out to America like most of your ancestors came? Why did we fly the Hawaiian flag on the Star of India? Why did they change the name? Why did they convert it from a ship rig to a bark rig? We'll try and answer those questions for you. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a voyage. We're all going on a voyage together, and I'm going to give you the National Enquirer version of the Docent training manual. We're going to get down into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about what it was really like. I'm going to try to paint some word pictures. We're going to be sailing together. It's not February 10th, 2026. It's February 10th, 1876. Social values are different. Things are different. We're going to go back. I'm going to use first-hand information from seamen and guests on the ship. We're going to look at contemporary news accounts and also ship's logs. All right. And then also we're going to talk about coincidences. One of the great things about our museum is we have several boats, like Jamie alluded to. There's a thread, interestingly enough, of history that runs today in my presentation between the Star, the Medea, and the California. All right. Okay, we'll start off with the popular perception. When we start to talk about this period, 1871 to 1897, oh yeah, that's when they took the immigrants out to New Zealand, the boat was loaded to the gunnels with immigrants, da-da-da. And truth of the matter, when you look at the ship's logs, hey, it's not quite what it seems. Yes, they did do that. And in fact, on one voyage, there's 410 people on board that boat. And in several cases, they did take hundreds of people. But in most cases, they took just a few. And in many cases, some cases, none. They carried munitions on 4 of the voyages. They went to my hometown, Melbourne, Australia, on 3 cases, and actually 4 cases, including in the lumber trade. And to point that David made, they carried mixed cargoes. You've got to remember, this is a multi-purpose cargo ship. Shore Saddle are trying to make money. Sometimes the cargo is humans. Other times it's mixed cargoes. They're looking for any way to make money. The logs show that they detoured. They went up to San Francisco. They went to Chile. They sailed back to Australia to pick up cargo. So they didn't just go east and keep going, although that's quite often what they did. All right. So, first question, why are they going to New Zealand rather than somewhere else? Well, let's look at the history of New Zealand. As late as the early 19th century, nobody's formally annexed New Zealand. No Western powers moved in. Abel Tasman's gone there, Cook's gone there, people who visited. The problem was that the natives, the locals, would invite you for lunch. What they didn't tell you was, hey, your lunch. So it wasn't real friendly on the part of the locals. Eventually, though, missionaries and private citizens started to move in, but the place was completely lawless. There's nobody really running the place. The British are getting a little nervous. The French are moving in. There's a reason why they call it French Polynesia. Tahiti used to be British. A lot of the islands in now French Polynesia were British also. So the colony of New Zealand is set up in 1840, and the main reason is to keep the French and the Americans out. Jim made this very good point the other day, and need to remember, no convicts were allowed in New Zealand. They had free settlers. That wasn't unique. The colony of South Australia in 1836 said the same thing. No convicts. And the colony of Victoria, when they became independent in 1850, they said, yeah, no convicts. Okay, so who's the threat? The British, by the way, are playing the classic colonial power handbook. First, you annex the place. Second, you suppress both external threats and internal threats. And then finally, when you got that all under control, you essentially exploit the locals. You take their raw materials, you take them back to the mother country, you build finished products with it. But in the meantime, here's the first threat, external threat. The American whalers were using the Bay of Islands in the northern part of the North Island in New Zealand as a hurricane, as a place to winter, to avoid the hurricane season. And the British were worried, hey, they're coming down in fairly significant numbers, maybe they'll set up a settlement. It turned out that didn't really come to pass. That if you're wondering what the picture is, on Russell in the Bay of Islands, it was called the hellhole of the Pacific. It was just lawless. The picture on the right-hand side is Bishop Pompallier, Roman Catholic bishop, and what the other power that was moving in were the French. Soft power was, hey, we'll send priests down there, we'll convert the natives and so on. Well, the French, being French, they decided, the British are systematically negotiating with the Maoris. You know what, we'll do an end run on them. We'll go to the South Island, we'll set up a settlement, and we'll go, hey, we're here now. So, like it or lump it. Well, the British decided, you know what, we've had enough of you guys. You're welcome to stay. You're welcome to have the French names on the streets, but you're under British rule. Take it or leave it, and we're not playing anymore. So the French decided, okay, we'll go along with that. But they decided, you know what, we'll back the locals. In the meantime, the British have been working their way systematically down through New Zealand, negotiating contracts. The main one, of course, is the Treaty of Waitangi, in 1840. Well, it's the typical classic thing. The indigenous people get screwed by the settlers coming in. We have the same thing here, we have the same thing in South Africa, etc. We have the same thing in Australia. Well, they underestimated the locals. The locals are, you've all seen the haka. That's a warrior culture. And the Maoris have a reputation for being fierce warriors, and they battle the British to a standstill several times. There's a few little bighorns, and the British go, oh my goodness. One of the things which is a thread of history is that they bring troops out from the UK and from India, and they bring the troops out from the UK on a ship called the Sea King. And does anybody know anything about the Sea King? Okay, the Sea King is sold a year later and becomes a Confederate States ship, the Shenandoah. And I'm going to defer to Margaret. The Sea King was built in a certain shipyard where we also built the Medea. So the common thread is Sea King bringing troops out to New Zealand, built by the same shipyard as the Medea. Okay, so that's one link. All right. The suppression strategy is, okay, what are we going to do to try and suppress these locals? Well, they decide, hey, we'll bring immigrant families out to New Zealand, we'll change the population mix, and that way we'll gradually be able to suppress the locals. There's a great incentive to do this because in the UK, things are really grim. You've got rapid industrialization, you've got land, you've got a breed of sheep in Scotland. My ancestors discovered the hard way that now this hardy sheep will be able to survive the Scottish winters. So the crofters, the Scottish small farmers, they're all kicked off their land. You only have to read Dickens to know how grim it was back in this period of time. All right, so here's what they did. The colonial governments plus individual private citizens, companies, they actively recruited immigrants. And the Euterpe was in fact a ship that was specifically chartered to do this sort of work. And you can see here, there's a couple of ads. Let me comment on these ads for a second. They're not looking for your huddled masses yearning to be free. Hey, we want people with skills. We want deadbeats. This ad on the right-hand side says, if you're the second or third son of some gentry in Britain, but you don't have a penny, and you think you're going to go out to New Zealand and lord it all over everybody, forget it. If you haven't got capital, we don't want to see you. So that's what they say that in a polite way in that ad. All right, this is a picture of David showed last week, and you'll see the heading down here is called the Mortal Gale. Okay, gang, this is where I hope you've had a double dose of the magic brownies back there, because I want you to use your imagination. We are here, this is us. We're standing here on the bikini deck, but we're actually, it's 1876, and we're on the dock, and we're about to immigrate to New Zealand on that ship over there, the Euterpe. And you have a look at the look on their faces. There's the dad, the mum, and the little baby. Okay, they're emigrating out, and I think the feeling is hope, but apprehension. It's like, oh my God, what the hell have we got ourselves into? They've burnt their bridges. They're on a ship that's going to the Antipodes. To give you an idea of what we're talking about in terms of time and speed, as we'll find out, the Euterpe was not very fast. It would go about 6 knots, which is like 7-8 miles an hour. Imagine you walked out of here and you hailed one of those little pedicabs out there, okay? And you said, take me to New York, okay? And the guy pedals you to New York and you go, you know, I changed my mind. I think I want to go back to San Diego. You pedal back to San Diego at your 8 mile an hour. And then you go, you know what? New York wasn't so bad after all. Go back. And you get back to New York and you go, well, you know, the weather's awful here. Take me back. So going across the US, San Diego to New York and back, twice. That's what 12,000 miles looks like at 8 miles an hour, okay? And that's why it takes 3 to 4 months. The people haven't really traveled very far. And of course, you're making a tremendous sacrifice. Grandpa and grandma aren't going to make it. The dog is going to have to be left behind and so on. So, you know, for anybody emigrating, it's quite a challenge, even today. All right, so who are these people that are immigrating? You don't want grandma and grandpa. Mainly it's married men and women under 40. In fact, some of the people that were sponsoring these people had these rules. Single men and women under 30, and then kids, children and infants. Here's the manifest for the biggest, or I should say the most heavily populated voyage. And when we go over there, I want you to think about this. Imagine 410 people on that boat, okay? But here it is, you can see here, roughly the same time, a few more single men, but boys and girls about the same, and 17 infants. This is, I want you to really zero in on this picture. This is what is probably closer to what it's like. We're going to go over there and we've all had a shower, we're all, there's only a few of us standing around the boat still. Hey, it's not like that. It's going to look more like this, all right? All right, so let's head out. Well, first of all, we're going to go down, we're heading south to go around the Cape of Good Hope. We're going to go below Australia, Cape Lewin, going to go below Tasmania, and then we're going to come up into the South Island of New Zealand. But on the way down, we're going to get becalmed. And for you eagle-eyed people, yes, this is not the Euterpe, it's a four-masted bark, but it looks close enough. Okay, I'm going to, with an Australian accent, we're going to give you some of the people's comments about the voyage so far. So here you can see here, in this particular case, Mr. Ellis, who we'll meet a little later, he has a comment here. As you can see, the calm has continued all day. I should hardly think we have gone a mile. The sea is like a sheet of yellowish gold. So, you're becalmed in some cases. And then you go to the other extreme. Now you're in the Southern Ocean. You're at 47 degrees south. That's the roaring 40s. No landmass. So the waves are just building and building and building. And you can see here, you've got massive following seas. What do you mean by massive following seas? Imagine a tennis court, and you turn it up vertical, and you got those just coming all the way behind you. You can see this, and I have to confess here, this is a picture of the Balclutha, but it looks very similar to the Euterpe. And you can see here that things could be very, very dangerous. You run the risk of, in this case, of basically being turned on its beam. Here's some important things to remember about the Euterpe. Some words: slow, wet, and strong. David alluded to how strong it is. The thing about the Euterpe is that it was slow and it was wet, but it was also manned by very competent captains. The Shore Saville, Mr. Saville, in fact, picked the captains of the immigrant ships. Here's another quote from one of our passengers. Very strong breeze, very heavy seas running. The waves are like mountains coming over her in tons. So, pretty scary stuff. Okay. You had to be hardy and you had to be healthy. Hence, that's the reason why some of these very young people are chosen to go out. First of all, you got constant noise. Waves hitting the side of the ship. Iron ship, like somebody hammering on the thing with a sledgehammer. You've got the crew and people shouting on deck, orders and things 24/7. You got people down below talking, shouting. You got babies crying. You got noise all the time. It's damp. Any of you that have been to sea, and everything gets damp after a while. You got people getting sick. They're not used to being on a ship. And so, the old thing, somebody gets sick and that sort of, everybody else sort of, oh God, then next thing they're sick. Consequently, it's smelly. I won't get too graphic on you, but that's part of the word picture. You got the latrines, you got people's body odor, you got, smelly. You got minimal privacy. There's a little bit of canvas that you can pull across, but basically it's you're pretty minimal privacy. And also it's relatively poor hygienic conditions. David alluded to it. You don't have fresh water, you've got to wash in salt water. And here's what the Euterpe Times, that's the newspaper on the boat, they said, this week we've been blessed with 2 very miserable days, a cold, raw, foggy, and generally disagreeable atmosphere prevailed, rendering life on the Euterpe anything but pleasant. So, you know, you know, Spirit Airlines is pretty bad, but this runs a close second. Okay. All right. You're in itchy, wet clothes. You don't have Gore-Tex on this thing. And, you know, depending on the weather, depending on the circumstances, you can, you know, any of you that have been wearing clothes, cotton, of course, it's cotton and wool, you're washing them in salt water, you can imagine how itchy that gets. They're going to get wet. You know, the alpine climbers say cotton kills, you know, you never really get cotton completely dry. And then they get sweaty. Your food, and we'll talk more about that later, bland. Oh my God, running out of time. Okay, bland food, minimal medical help. You do have a surgeon on board, but quite frankly, that person is probably Civil War type era training and equipment and medicines. No outside contact news. You don't know what's going on for 3 or 4 months. If the boat foundered, there's only 5 boats on board. If you're lucky enough to get into a boat, doesn't really help much because you're way down the Southern Ocean. The boat's going to either get swamped or you're going to die of hypothermia. So, you know, not exactly cheerful news, right? Finally, it's typhus. I know we've got Angela as a nurse, but yeah, one of the things that they were petrified was if you got an outbreak of typhus, this is 1876, guys, you don't have antibiotics. That could spread through the ship and you could lose a lot of people. This is a great quote here. The wave, besides carrying away the main hatch cover, carried away the taffrail, that's the rail around the stern of the boat. The scene was something fearful. Women and children screaming, men growling, boxes and bags floating, and no one knowing how high the water was going to get. So it's pretty scary stuff. Okay, who are these hardy people? Well, they're not poor. They have jobs. They're skilled tradesmen. And unlike the classic migrant story, it's where the men come out first and the kids and the wives come out later. Most of the people are emigrating as intact families. We talked about how many were on one voyage. The good thing is that despite all the overcrowding on several voyages, there were very low incidences of accidents and deaths. Okay. Coming out, they often went to an outfitter ahead of time. They had a mock-up of the ship and they said, okay, here's what it's going to be like. They brought their own bedding, by the way. And they also got equipment, suits and clothes to be out in the colonies. The tween deck, which we'll look at in a few minutes, they built the accommodation down there, which they would knock down at the end of the voyage. All bathing is done by salt water, but if you're in first class, you get your water heated up and brought down to you. The fresh water is only, as David mentioned, you've only got 4,000 gallons on board plus 100 gallons from the evaporator, and the only water, fresh water is only allowed for drinking, not for washing. How long does it take to get there? 3.5, 4 months, 4.5 months, sometimes longer, but no voyage with less than 100 days. There's no form of mechanical power on the boat and still isn't. You've got kerosene for the lamps and the running lights, that's it. There's no forced ventilation, and even as late as 1897, there's no refrigeration. Okay, in the accommodation area, under the saloon you've got, or in the saloon I should say, you've got accommodation for what they call the cabin class, that's first class, and you've got the ship's officer, first mate, the surgeon, superintendent, and about 12 passengers could fit there. First class, they essentially, it's not cheap, 52 pounds to 78 pounds. That's a lot of money back then. But they got certain privileges. They got steward service, better food, and we'll talk about that, and also more opportunity to store their luggage. Second-class passengers paid about $25. They would build prefab compartments in the stern of the Euterpe, and they would have their own steward to clean up things for them. But most of the people traveled this way. This is steerage, and you can see they had to basically clean up their own mess, get their own food, and so on. Single women in the back, married couples in the middle, and single men in the front. We don't want any mischief. Right. All right. Okay, so how do we want to keep people amused? Well, here again, the surgeon superintendent, in addition to providing medical help, sort of was also somewhat of a social worker. So you can see school classes for the kids. They had a newspaper, the Euterpe Times. They organized a lot of sports events, dances and things like that. They're encouraged to keep diaries, etc. We're very, very lucky. One of the things that gives us insight into the voyages was we had a lot of people that kept diaries. And that's what I'm giving you quotes from some of them. They had church on Sunday. Now, they also performed a regular airing of the living quarters, because remember, it can get pretty foul down there. And they also washed the clothes. So once again, they're very concerned about typhus. The second-class passengers and steerage are allowed up on deck as weather permits, about 30 at a time for a few hours, but the first-class passengers have the luxury, as David will show you, sitting up on the quarterdeck on the seats up there. Okay, all the cooking. How's the food? Well, the cooking is all done in the cookhouse, and the pantry's located there. People ate at their sort of mess areas. There's no refrigeration, so the fresh fruit and vegetables run out very, very quickly. Most people are on. It's fairly bland, a lot of carbohydrates, some protein, but it's all dry food and things like that. And we'll see, the first-class passengers did have the luxury of having a steward that would serve their meals after he brought them down from the galley. Okay, one of the things that the British introduced was a scale of dietary. There's some horror stories about early voyages called the death of the coffin ships taking immigrants out from Ireland from Britain. From Ireland to the United States, I should say. So they brought in rules, for example, 21 quarts, that was your allowance as an adult, 21 quarts of water. That's about 5 gallons a week. Okay, sounds a lot, but goes past pretty quick. And you got a 1 pound of sugar. The only thing really to make the bland food a little bit more, spark it up a bit, was to add sugar. So, first-class passengers, they get what's called the unlimited table option. They get all of these things. They get fresh meat because they would store animals in crates on above the main hatch on the cover. They would get any fresh fruit and vegetable that was available. They got the staples. They also got wine, beer, and spirits. We'll talk about that. Okay, second-class passengers got more like canned food, the staples as well, and then poor old third-class passengers and the crew, they ate basically salted meat as well. And you'll notice here, these get wine and beer, no spirits, and these get even less wine and beer. We'll talk about that too. So how's the food? Well, as you can see here, food at times was very bad. And once a complaint was made about the soup, an investigation revealed a man's sock in the stock pot. Now this is the one that really gets people. The food became very short. I can well remember the excitement among the passengers when a rat pie was brought from the galley. Okay? We find on board there's a few unsavory characters. We discover actually that, hey, hunting down rats and eating them sometimes is somewhat of a preoccupation. And let me quote, Mrs. Ellis was suddenly alarmed by a large rat tumbling off the top of her bunk onto her head. She shrieked in horror, seized her shawl, and jumped on the table. She declared she would never go to bed again in that horrid ship. Right? Another exciting sport has suddenly sprung up on the ship, that of rat hunting, and has been followed with signal success. There was an exhibition on the quarterdeck of the great catch of the preceding night, and the ribbons were attached to the biggest of the varmints. instrument of torture or choice, belaying pin, right? Okay, last one here for all of you poets. You shouldn't eat rats. They're dirty, unclean, and surely ain't meant for our food. And they say in a whisper, please cut me mine lean if my daintiness doesn't seem rude. Okay, so there we go, rats. All right. Not everybody on board the Euterpe back then is little angels like you guys. You got people who are used to working 6 days a week, suddenly they're for 3 or 4 months, they've got nothing to do. And so there's, the old saying, idleness is the devil's workshop. So we've got potential for drunkenness, fights, and thefts. Okay, how do we deal with the bad apples? Well, let's talk about something near and dear to an Australian's heart, alcohol. Spirits. The only people allowed to have spirits are the people in first class because they're gentle people, right? They're couth. Can't have the uncouth people in steerage particularly getting spirits. But you could buy liquor. The captain determined how much liquor was made available and the type. No private stashes. But, people can be bribed. So what happened? Well, those that want for a drink will sell a good suit for a few shillings, and drink is very dear on board. I love this one. Christmas night was a jolly spree. The sailors, saloon passengers, and the second-class passengers were all about drunk. But the captain was quite sober. We, that's meaning our group, are all sober. In third class, we only had 2 bottles of wine. So they were sober because they were only given a little limited amount of wine. Okay, thefts. We see that if something was stolen, it was investigated by the mate. They could search and look for stuff. If they found somebody they thought was guilty, they would bind them over to a magistrate's court when they got to New Zealand. And we see, sure enough, an immigrant per the Euterpe recently stole a watch. The offender was brought before the resident magistrate in Masterton yesterday and received a sentence of 6 months imprisonment with hard labour. That was from the Evening Post, 1874. Directly after Euterpe, was moored, the police flag was hoisted for the arrest of one of the steerage passengers accused of stealing cargo in the form of preserved milk. That was from the Otago Witness, 1877. Okay, so where did they go? Basically, they sailed mainly from London to Dunedin, particularly the Scots went to Dunedin, but they also made voyages to other New Zealand ports as well. They would load up with local stuff and then keep going east around Cape Horn and back to the UK. 21 voyages, roughly, to the moon and back. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the test. Okay, here's a couple of comments about the voyages. Common thread, Euterpe, slow. In fact, the slowest. I won't read it all out because it's pretty easy to read. Basically, it says here, hey, we got there, it took a hell of a long time, but we all got here as happy as sandboys. Margaret told me what that meant. Yeah, the health is well looked after by the surgeon and the matron. Here we are again. This is that voyage with the 410 on it. Euterpe made it long passage, 124 days. That's a long time to be at sea. But everybody they lost 2 babies, but 6 were born. And the general reaction was that, hey, we're a band of brothers. We made it through all this. And a lot of people we see from diaries and things, they formed bonds with other people on the ship. And we also have examples of young girls being called Euterpe after the ship. Okay, not all the voyages were to New Zealand. We have what I call atypical voyages, 9 of them. The first voyage was in fact to Melbourne and was general cargo. You can see they were carrying things like horses, hospital furniture. I want to draw your attention to these 4 here. They were carrying munitions, and it was the munitions you might think, well, what for? It was basically for demolition of, actually for construction, mining, and land clearing, but also for defence, particularly in the case of these 2 here in Melbourne. Okay, another coincidence. Shaw Savill, as it turned out, when they acquired the Euterpe, they had a ship, and it's called the Star of India. And it's got a very similar history. It's built by Andrew Stephen and Son, which, Margaret, who else has, what other ship around here has been built by Andrew Stephen and Son? Medea, yes. And as we mentioned before, the Sea King that turned into the Shenandoah was also built by Andrew Stephen and Sons. And you can see very similar, general cargo to India, general cargo to Australia, and also converted to a bark, from a ship rig to a bark rig. Well, eventually the ship is sold. And before we leave, any questions on that section? All right. Yeah, sorry.
About how big was the population before and after this period of immigration?
You know what? I'm not absolutely sure. I just know that the Maori population significantly was larger than the European population. And the Maoris had some very dynamic chiefs that got the tribes who, you know, the old thing, you get the natives to fight among each other, you know. But they bonded together, and that's why they gave the British such a hard time, because they were really bonded together. They outnumbered the settlers quite significantly. And then with the French helping the Maoris as far as weapons and things, you know, they were quite a handful for quite a while.
And was Euterpe the primary immigrant ship?
No.
Or were there multiple?
There were multiple ships. In fact, Shaw Savill owned a few of them, but no, there were several. Sorry, I've got somebody here with a question. Yes.
Do we have an estimate of the number of immigrants carried?
No, I'm not absolutely sure. That's a good question. I'll have to find that out. What we do know is it was sporadic. You know, sometimes they carried a lot, sometimes very few. Probably I'd say in the low thousands over the 20 odd years. Okay, just a comment on that as we leave it. To David's point, the Euterpe by this time is 35 years old, and you know she's still a viable vessel, but most of the vessels of this time period are worn out. Good example is the original Star of India. It lasted, they found it half submerged in 1893. So wooden boats were falling apart, but also we find that the sailing ships essentially by the 1890s, everybody's coming out by steam. And final comment on this, you can see from this quote here, the longest voyage from Great Britain during the year is 125 days, Euterpe having this questionable distinction. To make amends, the steamship Atrato belonging to the same company, Shaw Savill, did it in 62 days. So steamships getting out in half the time, okay? All right, now we move on to the Pacific Triangle. The background on this is shady characters and a lot of wheeling and dealing. And the voyages are sort of somewhat secondary. Okay, couple of questions. Why did the Euterpe end up on the ship's registry of 3 different nations in 3 years? And then how did the Euterpe end up going from a British ship to an American ship? Well, in order to talk about that, we have to talk about the Republic of Hawaii. The British gave Hawaii back to the monarchy, but the local the local haoles, which included Spreckles and Doles and other wealthy planters, decided, hey, you know what? We ought to run this place. So they engineered a coup d'etat, helped out by the Marines. I know we've got a few former Marines, I'm not allowed to say ex-Marines. And a little gunboat diplomacy, they essentially overthrew the monarchy and put in their own government. And they declared it as a republic. But they really weren't interested in long term. It was like, hey, over here guys, we're a republic now, but we'd love you over the United States to annex us and make us a territory. So that was their plan. Well, in the meantime, somebody in San Francisco did a little bit of legal sleuthing and discovered, hey, you know what? If we take over a country, we get their ships. And so they said, oh, that's interesting. These British ships are really well built. We can get them cheap. And why don't we get some and we'll put them under the Republic of Hawaii registration. So they get, in 1898, they get 3, Euterpe, Star of Italy, and Star of France. And a Howley called Lincoln Spencer, who pretends to be an Hawaiian, says, hey, I'm an Hawaiian. Yeah, let's buy them and we'll put them on the registry. And Jerry McMullen's book, Star of India, talks about this gentleman as the dubious Hawaiian. So anyway, they do get put on the register, but you can see, even though they were registered initially in July 2nd, 1898, it went all the way to the Supreme Court of the Republic. They weren't real happy with it. They sort of knew that, hey, the fix is in here. Okay, here is the 3 ships, and they're flying the Republic of Hawaii flag, which you all know today as the Hawaiian state flag. There's the money. There were several other ships that were also put on this Hawaiian Republic of Hawaii registry. Oh, what happened? Oh, there we go. All right, so what happens? The coup plotters get their wish. President, is this McKinley? Yeah, President McKinley says, we're annexing Hawaii and we're declaring it a territory in July 1898. So the ploy paid off. Now, what I discovered was that the Union shipping fleet had been decimated during the Civil War. After the Civil War, they built a lot of wooden ships. Now they're wearing out. And one of the reasons why the ploy is to get these British ships, especially these iron ships, is, hey, we can get them cheap. We don't have to get them a new ship built in an American yard, which costs a lot of money. Well, of course, the shipbuilders and the unions figured this one out, and they led on McKinley and said, hey, no more of this stuff. No more letting these ships in. So what we find is that Euterpe is going to sea, but it's basically stateless. No insurance carriers going, well, Republic of Hawaii, who the hell are they? We don't recognize that. So they're sailing essentially with papers of little or no value. However, in the meantime, the Organic Act is parked, which says, okay, if the ship is owned by US citizens and registered before 1898, then it can be grandfathered in. Now, with a sleight of hand, the ownership of the Euterpe goes from Lincoln Spencer to a company called Pacific Colonial Shipping, which is here in San Francisco. So they put their hand up and go, yay, we're US citizens. And yes, we had the ship on the Hawaiian registry in July of 1898, so we qualify, and they do. So Congress makes an honest woman of our ship over here, and she becomes an American ship. So that's how they went from British, Republic of Hawaii, American in 3 years. Okay? Very important point. We're the only Republic of Hawaiian ship that still actively sails. Okay? So that's a thing to remember about this period. Okay, so what do they do with it? Jim alluded to this, David alluded to it. Hey, there's still a niche for bulky cargoes, non-perishable, where you don't have to get there in a hurry. Could be wheat, could be nitrates, could be wool, it could be timber. In fact, timber's a big business. So, what they do with the Euterpe is they pick up lumber from North America and they take it to Australia. To this day, if you go to equivalent of Home Depot in Australia and you want Douglas fir, it's called Oregon. Okay? So they would go out, a lot of people say to me, hey, don't you have trees in Australia? Yeah, we do have trees, but we don't have the right trees for construction. So lumber from North America, they would pick up coal on the east coast of Australia, use Newcastle, north of Sydney, sail back to Hawaii. Okay, 2 reasons why they're bringing coal. One obviously is there's more steamships, so they want to bunker those steamships with coal. Can anybody think of the second reason why they're hauling coal to Honolulu? Remember the time frame. We're dealing with 1898, 1900. Sorry? What are they going to do with? Oh, okay. Yeah, possibly. In other words, you're driving some sort of motors or engine or something. So, let me give you my version. They're taking coal to Newcastle because there's a new wonderful invention called electricity. Okay? And you need to have coal to fire up the power plant, right? And then finally, of course, they're picking up something that they can sell back on the mainland, which is available in Honolulu, and that happens to be sugar. Now, you'll see this as we walk over. We have stern. You'll see there are basically square ports in the stern of the Euterpe, and they were put in around this period. It was a lot easier to bring the logs in through the stern than it was to try and drop them down through the main hatch. There was only 3 voyages. And of course, here's the 4th and last voyage. It goes to Melbourne, Australia, and it's sold. And it's sold to Alaska Packers Association. You're thinking, what? Why is somebody in Alaska buying a ship? And that gets us to our next phase. Before we get there, yeah, Bill. That's probably a good point. Does anybody else have any questions on this part? Okay, oh, I've stunned you all into silence. Okay, all right, we'll keep going then. Oh, David made a good point. If you read the logs and the history of the Euterpe, it's either getting run into by somebody else or it's running into somebody. It's like demolition derby. And we see here, and David mentioned the fact that almost foundered in a cyclone. We also see the Euterpe using up its 9 lives. It runs aground off Diamond Head, it gets stranded on a reef off Maui, and it's seen as unstable. So if that cargo moves, there's a high probability this ship could roll over on its beam ends and down she goes. So it's, okay, they convert the ship, APA buys it, Alaska Packers Association, they take it back to San Francisco, they convert it to a bark rig. And what we find in this period of time is that they're converting a lot of these old sailing ships to be fishing support vessels. There's a great model you'll see when we go and look at it as far as the changes from how the Euterpe used to look to how it was modified. They added power to it. They extended the saloon out to the main, basically to the main mast, additional water tanks, and they, of course, changed the rigging from a ship rig to a bark rig. And they painted it a different color. It's the colors you see it now. Okay, so why did they convert it to a bark rig? Well, you know, David mentioned the fact that the lower half of the mast, including the mizzen mast, was an iron tube. It's heavy. So one way to be able to have more people on board and still keep the balance was to replace that iron rig that they've got for a ship rig. On the mizzen mast, they change it to essentially a wooden mast, and it's a bark rig. Also, they're sailing with a limited amount of crew. They're looking for help from some of the fishermen, and it's a lot easier to sail a bark than it is a full ship. And also, the fore and aft configuration is a lot easier to maneuver when you're out in open water fishing. So then they finally get the ship converted and they take it up to Alaska. They either tow it or sail it to Alaska. And begs the question though, hey, what are a bunch of fish canneries doing with a bunch of... APA at one point had one of the largest sailing fleets in the world in the early 20th century. Begs the question, why? And also the one that you're probably all interested in, why'd they change the name? Euterpe seems like a lovely name. Why change it? Okay, so let's find out. Well, first of all, APA is set up, it's a cartel. The fish canneries get together and say, hey, you know what? Why don't we all cooperate together? This way we can influence the supply and demand of salmon, which makes up about 80% of the revenue for the state of Alaska at this time. So they have a bunch of canneries all over Alaska. And yeah, they're 80% of basically the revenue at this time. And like any dominant cartel, they are seen as pretty ruthless, and they are ruthless in suppressing competition. But they have a few good points. Their hospitals provide help, and also when they had the 1919 pandemic, they took over and looked after a lot of the orphan kids and things like that. So why do they end up with sailing ships? Well, salmon fishing is a seasonal thing. It's about 4 months of the year. You could buy a sailing ship really relatively cheaply and easily and convert them easily as well. Wasn't a lot of money. So that's why they went and bought sailing ships. Also, those sailing ships were strong. You're in ice, remember? Okay, so APA bought several ships from a company called James P. Corey and Company in Belfast, and they had the Star line. All their ships were named Star of this, Star of that. And the owners, APA, said, oh, yeah, we like that. Why don't we give the ships all a star name? So they converted Balclutha, became Star of Alaska, and Euterpe became Star of India. So that's how it got to be Star of India, okay, in 1906. Okay, almost there. This is what the fleet looked like. This is wintering in Alameda about 1920. You can see, at one point they had 32 boats. In 1927, they still owned 14, and unfortunately only two are left. The Star of India and the Balclutha up at the San Francisco Maritime Museum. So this is what it looks like. It was out, you can see the back wind of the main sails on the main mast, basically keep the boat either stationary, only moving slightly forward while the dories are out fishing. And it did that for about 4 months of the year. Here we are. We left San Francisco with about 200 men on board. Half were the cannery gang, the rest were fishermen, the beach gang, cooks, etc. That's from the first voyage, the 1903 voyage. The crew is a motley crew. You've got Anglos, Chinese, Filipinos, Japanese. They even have their own galleys. And the reason why a lot of fishermen went up there is you could make some pretty good money, $500, $600 for 4 months. Back in 1903, that's good money. And you can see here they are in the dories here with the mothership in the background there. Whoops. Well, once again, Star is in trouble. It's caught in the ice. It's using up its 9 lives. And fortunately, it's saved by a steam tug that tows it into open water. So we still have it. And finally, on August 30th, 1923, it brings back the final cargo of salmon. And on September 6th, they tow it over to Alameda. And essentially, we don't know what's going to happen to it. To be continued. Any questions on this period? No, you're all stunned into silence. Well, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
I just had one question about the shady characters.
Yes.
Who were the shady characters? Were they like mafia people? Or?
Well, you know, they're shady in the sense that by a subterfuge, they're pretending to be Hawaiians. Okay?
Oh, okay.
And, you know, the rules were, hey, you have to be a native-born Hawaiian in order to own these ships and have them registered in Hawaii. So Lincoln Spencer, who's very much a Howley, is pretending to be Hawaiian. The other thing is that when they sold the ship in New Zealand, they were very circumspect about who exactly owned it. You know, 3 or 4 months later, it turns up in Honolulu. And what we find is that these sort of guys in San Francisco and that formed the Pacific Colonial Shipping Company, they're sort of doing this wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. So that's where I get sort of shady characters. Okay? Any other questions? All right.
Also, the whole conversion of Hawaii from an independent nation to a territory to a U.S. colony was all very choreographed by the Growers, the Dole family, and all those other people. And the political machinations were not very nice. The history of that's fascinating if you ever want to delve into that. Okay.
I got one thing to show them.
Okay, we've got one more thing here.
You've all been on our website by now, please. All right. But we have one of the sections here is called Library and Research. And in here, down in the middle, you have all these archives and information, but there's a link to something called the Maritime Museum of San Diego Catalog Hub. And this has a wealth of information. And this is all public access that you can take a look at. One of the things is, if you wanted to look at some of the old copies of the Mainsail Hall, they're here. One of them I highly recommend is the one from 150 years. It's the one of the black. And if you read that, in fact, I recommend you read it to cover, it will tell you all the history, or not all the history, but most of the history of what we've been talking about, with a lot of pictures, and they have the Ellis diaries and things like that. So if you can get on the website, you can go on this thing. Let's see if we get to it.
What's the date of it?
Sure.
That's the date of the issue.
All right. Want to start from the beginning? Okay. The other thing that we have in this hub, let me turn this off, is photographs. And it has all kinds of different photographs, not just of the Star of India, but the Maritime Museum, other ships, etc. A lot of it is actually the pictures that you've been seeing in our demonstrations and stuff like that. And you can kind of scroll through them, you can search through them, and you get a lot of information on the entire museum. So I just wanted to show you how you navigated to that. Okay?
Thank you. Okay. So for our walkabout period, we're going to divide the trainees into two groups. We're going to have one group having a tour of the deck area of the Star. The other group will go below for about 20 minutes each, and then we'll switch. Okay? So let's line up at the gangway at the Star of India and divide into two groups. The senior docents are welcome to lag back behind them and accompany them if they wish, but let the trainees primarily get the lead in going in.